Welcome to Zebes, a hostile planet home to foreign creatures wanting nothing but to survive, killing you if necessary, along with space pirates, the very monster responsible for brutally murdering your parents among them. Your mission? To find the last surviving Metroid capable of producing an unlimited amount of clones to be unleashed on the galaxy. Are you ready? This is Super Metroid, undoubtedly a classic of its time. The original Metroid may have pioneered a genre, but Super Metroid perfected it. With stellar gameplay, remarkable graphics, and a world that reeked of atmosphere, Super Metroid dominated the SNES in '94. Although performing outstandingly on the system, fans wouldn't see another Metroid game until Metroid Prime in 2002, 8 years later. Despite this, Prime rivaled the quality of Super Metroid, perhaps even doing it better according to some fans. Putting the player inside of the power suit, it's arguable that Retro Studios may have given Metroid the flawless transition to 3D it deserved on the GameCube, but the question still lingers. Why wasn't a Metroid game released during the 3D crazed era that was the life cycle of the Nintendo 64? All the established franchises under Nintendo's belt got their share. There really isn't much information around to answer why Metroid 64 was never created. However, I can't help but wonder, what if they did? To answer these questions, we're gonna have to go back to the beginning to find out what makes Metroid so special. One thing that makes Metroid of all Nintendo franchises so memorable is the pioneering of a genre. This genre is known as Metroidvania. Mimicked by many others over time, the premise of a game dubbed Metroidvania involves the exploration of an often large, non-linear world. At the time of Metroid OG's release, this was relatively new for games. Most guided the player on a set sequence of levels, whereas Metroid dropped you into a giant world with little to no guidance. While Super Mario Bros. Had you skipping through level after level, Metroid dropped you in on Planet Zebes and told you to go explore. The difference that Metroid has the edge in is world building. World building is the process of constructing an imaginary world, sometimes associated with a whole fictional universe. What I'm trying to explain is that Super Mario Bros. Feels gamey, while Metroid took gaming to another level. Why do you even play video games? Because they're fun, right? I agree, but more often than not, I find myself playing games for the sake of escaping reality. Mario Bros. Doesn't make me feel like I'm a part of the Mushroom Kingdom. Once you start a game and you see that screen, World 1-1, you're constantly reminded that you're playing a video game, not exploring a living, breathing world. Now, don't get me wrong, the fact that a game feels, gamey doesn't necessarily detract from its value. In fact, I love those types of games. Throw me a Game Boy with Tetris and I'll be locked into a match for as long as it takes before I screw up. But even Mario can tell you that world building is important. The evolution of the world map from Super Mario Bros. 3 to Super Mario World is evidence enough that Mario may have taken some advice from our friend Samus. So what does it take to effectively build a believable world? You can't just carve out an open space for someone to run around in and call it a day. Look no further than Super Metroid and Metroid Prime. Atmosphere. At this point, we all know what atmosphere is. The internet knows atmosphere. As it contributes to Super Metroid, the faint thunder in the background, the dark caverns, the hot boiling lava, and the ever-ambient music. The details all illustrate the fact that unless you're careful, everything on this planet is going to kill you. The feeling of isolation is often overwhelming. The dictionary might as well cite Metroid as a synonym for isolation. For instance, in Prime, that one reflection of Samus's face on her visor is a constant reminder that this mission isn't going to complete itself. It's about you, and you alone. You versus Zebus. You versus Talon 4. You can't get more alone than that. There's also something to say about graphics here, visuals. While the ever-present debate exists that graphics don't matter in video games, I'm going to play devil's advocate. In games that take the medium to the next level, graphics matter. How else do you create a believable world? OG Metroid will always be remembered as the launchpad for the series, for the genre, but today, there's not really a reason to go back to it. Any veteran of the series will recommend Zero Mission over the original to newcomers, and although I'm not familiar with Zero Mission, the upgraded visuals are certainly noteworthy along with the other changes made. While Super Metroid looked and sounded amazing for the time, it doesn't hold a candle to the beauty that is Metroid Prime. Spatial immersion. Prime is king when it comes to immersion. There's no other experience in gaming prior to Metroid Prime that I recall immerses the player as well as it. When you enter that power suit, you become Samus. The interface, the mist, the splash of enemy guts on your visor, and Samus's own reflection over the blinding enemy fire. Amazing. This interpretation of Metroid is simply breathtaking.
That being said, where does that leave the fabled Metroid 64? Could it have pulled this in with the same amount of immersion and atmosphere ever present in Super Metroid and Prime? To be honest, I'm not so sure.
As for factual information about Metroid 64, we don't know too much, except for one interview with series co-creator Yoshio Sakamoto, which gives some pretty interesting insight. Confirming that the game never entered production, Sakamoto can be quoted in an interview with Games TM shortly after Other M was released. I was actually thinking about the possibility of making a Metroid game for N64, but I felt that I shouldn't be the one making the game. When I held the N64 controller in my hands, I just couldn't imagine how it could be used to move Samus around. So for me, it was just too early to personally make a 3D Metroid game at that time. Nintendo at that time approached another company and asked them if they would make an N64 version of Metroid, and the response was that no, they could not. They turned it down, saying that unfortunately they didn't have the confidence to create an N64 Metroid game that could compare favorably with Super Metroid.
Now, I don't know about you, but hearing this concerns me slightly. How could the man responsible for directing Super Metroid, a huge innovation to gaming as a whole, whether it was recognized at the time or not, have this apprehension towards the next logical step in the industry? Not only that, but a whole nother company lacking the confidence to tackle one of Nintendo's biggest franchises? Interesting, to say the least.
But that's all we know about Metroid 64. Aside from a single convincing but fake screenshot, Sakamoto's response may be the only information we'll ever get on Metroid 64, but that won't stop me from speculating. When I think of Metroid 64, no matter how hard I try, I just can't see a definitive Metroid experience. To understand what I mean, let's go back to the original Metroid. OG Metroid is archaic. Because of the lack of buttons on the NES controller, the gameplay suffers. You can't shoot diagonally, and there's no map. The environments all have boring black backgrounds with mere color swaps to tell them apart. It's so easy to get lost. I recommend watching First's retrospective on Metroid. He does an amazing job explaining why Metroid doesn't hold up along with many other things. I just get this feeling that Metroid 64 would suffer the same fate. You see, I've noticed a sort of trend in Nintendo home consoles. The NES and the N64 are similar in the fact that they're both a bit rough around the edges. They're both trying something new, be it a breakthrough in the video game console market or 3D polygons. On the other hand, I find the SNES and the GameCube to be pretty comparable. While not really trying anything too innovative hardware-wise, there's an increased emphasis on polish, with more colors, higher fidelity graphics, and smoother controls. It's for this reason that I'm skeptical on how Metroid 64 would have turned out. As much as I love the N64, it just might have not been the right time for a Metroid game, at least comparable in the slightest to the likes of Super Metroid. Developers were just diving into 3D technology, and a big problem was the camera. Along with simply getting it to work, when developing a Metroid game, you have to take into account the appropriate perspective. Most games at the time were using a third-person perspective, and for good reason. It may seem obvious to some that a first-person perspective would be the best route for a 3D Metroid, considering, well, the whole Metroid Prime series. But do you know what happens when you see an N64 world through the eyes of its characters? really bad textures. That's not really in the spirit of Metroid. Metroid isn't just a game, it's an experience unlike any other. That's why it defines a genre. Metroid 64 may have been incapable of providing us with the same atmosphere, the same immersion that resonates through both Super Metroid and Metroid Prime. Sure, it may have been a fun game, and I probably would have liked it, but it wouldn't have been Metroid fun. Heck, when I started this video, I thought for sure I'd have loads of ideas of how this game could have been amazing, but the more I think about it, the more skeptical I become. But hey, maybe Sakamoto knew that. Maybe he knew all along that it just wasn't the right time to make a Metroid. Ultimately, I'm thankful for his decision in not pursuing the game, because if he did, we may not have had the beauty that is Metroid Prime.
What's up, viewer? Thanks for checking out this video. If you liked it, please subscribe and maybe follow me on social media. Also, hopefully you leave a comment, it would really help me out. If you feel it necessary, you can try checking out some of my other videos, like my What If video on Sonic Lost World, and the 6 DLC characters Frank and I want to see in Mario Kart 8. I'm going to start doing a new thing on here where I recommend more videos from other YouTubers for you to watch. So to start, we've got Wally the Legend and his Metroid Prime review, really spot on. Also, Super Samicon, who's given me a new interest in Metroid 2 that I never thought I would have, and as promised earlier, first review on Metroid. Holy crap, it is amazing. Go listen to his epic voice. It is awesome. Also, big thank you to these guys for inspiring me. Anyways, I'm out of here. Thanks for sticking around. See ya!